this video, I'll be recreating this Cipher animation inside of Blender. You're going to learn how they handle scene building, character creation and animation, so you can implement these techniques into your own documentaries. All assets and useful links will be available in the description. So let's start. Hey guys, I just wanted to show you a couple things that will serve as context for what you are going to see next. The first thing is that I made this mirror board with screenshots of the Cipher video just to have a reference to copy while I was building the scene. And this was super useful to know all the spacing between the objects, how the lighting should be and all that stuff. Then another important thing is that I recorded this on my laptop, which is in a 16:9 ratio. So for most of the tutorial you have some black bars at the side because I didn't know how to set up OBS, so the content fills up the whole screen. So yeah, now I got it right because as you can see it's filling all the screen, although it's a bit stretched. And the last thing I wanted to show you is that I recorded the original audio from Cipher's video and added it to the video sequencer. So if you don't know how to do that, you just have to record or just download the original video. In my case it was the Cipher one, and just press Shift A and you can add either a video or an audio, or you can just drag and drop it. And selecting this blade right here, you can make cuts like this, so you have exactly the piece of audio that you want. So based on the audio, then I added markers on my scene, and that's how I know when to do every camera shot, every camera change. So that's pretty important. And the last thing I didn't cover on my tutorial is how I got this car. This car is from Blender Kit, which is this add-on right here, and I think you can get it with a pro version, which is just $14 a month, but I think now it's at a discount because of Black Friday. It's not an affiliate, it's just something very useful, and I'm using it for all my projects right now. And obviously the car didn't have these materials, it had other colors, but essentially what you have to do is enter all the materials from all the different objects and then go to the shader editor and change the colors as you need. For example, here I added a bluish color with 1 of soft surface and then 1 on all the radius and 0.05 on scale, although you can increase this if you want. And yeah, I copied these settings into almost every other material. For example, I have this part, which is the rust part of the car, and I also added this bluish tone with a soft surface, and I pretty much repeated that process with all the materials so I could maintain all the details while having this bluish, almost white tone. So yeah, that's it. Enjoy the tutorial. It's not like a full tutorial, it's actually like a breakdown of me going through the entire process. So hope you enjoyed and give me feedback on this new style of video, which isn't like the raw style I'm used to. So yeah, see you there. The first thing I did was position the car and then my camera as close to the original scene as possible, always checking the reference. Then I added a plane that will serve as a base for where the street and the sidewalk would be in the future. Then I added a human meta-rig to make sure the scale of the car was right. Turns out it wasn't. So I ended up increasing its size a little bit. If you want to have this meta-rig option enabled when pressing Shift A, you should activate the Rigify add-on by going to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons and searching for Rigify. After that, I searched for another car using the Blender Kit add-on. I basically wanted a simple one that I would use to add traffic to the scene and calculate the width of the street. This car didn't need a lot of detail, so I selected all meshes from it, pressed right-click, Convert to, and then Mesh. I did this to apply all modifiers, and then I pressed Ctrl-J to join all the car meshes, deleted all its materials, and added a simple one with a bluish base color with 0.5 of roughness and these soft surface settings. After that, I positioned it on the street, duplicated it with Alt-D and reduced the plane size so I can make it more symmetrical with an array modifier. Then I repositioned the car to fit the second array copy, added 2 more and duplicated both cars with Alt-D. Now I went back to the plane with the array, applied it, and dissolved the extra edges. After that, I really wanted to nail the distance between the car and the street, so I copied my reference from my Miro board and asked Nano Banana Pro inside the Google AI Studio to duplicate the car until it reaches the street. The result was great and helped me calculate the distance as I wanted. Then I selected the outer edge of the street with edit mode and extruded it to start creating the sidewalk. I checked the reference and noticed that the sidewalk has two different materials, so I extruded the plane 2 times in the same direction to assign different materials to those faces later. After that, I added a loop cut in the center, deleted half of the plane, pressed Shift S and cursor to selected, then went to object mode, right-click, set origin to 3D cursor, added a mirror modifier to make everything symmetric, applied it and dissolved the extra edge in the center. Then, using Blender Kit, I added the first building, trying to get as close as possible to the reference. Here you see me changing the viewport color of the sidewall because I wanted to get the spacing right, but you don't necessarily need to do that. I tried different models until I landed on the one I liked the most. Then went to Material Preview, deleted the ground from the building and wanted to erase all the textures from it. But since it had lots of them, I used a script that will delete all materials from the selected meshes. I got this script from ChatGPT, and I'll leave it in the description if you want to copy it. Once I executed the script, I added the basic light blue material with soft surface to the building. First, I applied it to one of the meshes, then pressed Ctrl L and link materials. That way, I quickly pasted the light blue color to the entire building. After that, I went to Render View to tweak the color and soft surface settings. The trick here is to maintain the 3 radius to 1, but play with the scale. Then I proceeded to add another building in front and repeated the process from the previous one. The rest of the buildings from the reference were minimalist, so I just added a cube, tweaked the size, and applied the light blue material. After that, I searched for a commercial sign model to put on top of the cube, but I couldn't find it on Blender Kit and neither Sketchfab. So I sent my reference image to Nano Banana Pro and it created a clean picture of the model I was looking for. The result was great, so I sent it to Meshi AI to generate a 3D model. Once I downloaded it, I placed it on my scene, like in the reference. But now I wanted to work on the materials from the street. So the first thing I did was search for a road material on Blender Kit, applied it to the face that belonged to the street, pressed 7 on my numpad, U, project from view, and tweaked the UVs on the UV editor until it had the look I wanted. However, the best road texture I found had too many cracks and details, but I wanted something a lot cleaner. So I downloaded the picture from the base color, sent it to Nano Banana Pro, and asked it to generate a black and white image with clear lines instead of all the detail the texture had previously. Again, the result was great, so I replaced the base color from the material with my image and deleted all the other PBR pictures from the original texture. Once I did that, I added a mixed color node and connected the Nano Banana image to the factor. This way, I could manipulate the black and white values to give them different color and match my reference. Finally, for the rest of the settings, I just set the metallic to 1 and the roughness to 0.3. Then I tweaked the rest of the sidewalk materials based on the reference. By the way, if all the node work I did for the materials seem complicated for you, it's actually pretty simple. And members from Render Room do these kinds of material tweaking on their first day inside of the community, just by following their first lesson where they get to install Blender and follow a step-by-step tutorial to achieve this scene you're watching right here. And the best part is that it's free. You just need to go to the first link in the description and start a 7-day free trial. Now, moving on to lighting, I was using a sky texture to preview all the materials in Render View, but I no longer needed that. So I deleted the world lighting and added the first setup I came up with, which consisted in 3 sun lamps, a warm one rotated from an angle, a cold one rotated from the opposite angle, and finally a third one with a white color coming straight from the top, but with a very low value. This setup honestly was trash and not similar to the Cipher's one, but you will see how I change it up later. In the meantime, I worked on compositing. It was pretty simple, just a color balance node to improve contrast and a lens distortion node to add some chromatic aberration. After that, I added an empty on the same car's position to control the camera's depth of field. Then I added a tree model from Blender Kit similar to the one from the reference. After that, I added a circle, reduced its vertices to 6 and filled it with an n-gon, which is a face with more than 4 vertices. Then I selected everything, extruded it inside the top face, Alt-E, extrude faces along normals, pushed it inside the model to generate this base similar to the Cipher's video, and parent everything to an empty so I can control the movement easily. Then I gave both the tree and the base the same basic light blue material with subsurface. Finally, I selected everything and duplicated it with Alt-D. Here you see me tweaking the spacing between the objects, but after that I searched for a bus stop model to position between the trees. I also applied the light blue material to it. After checking the reference, I noticed that the top part of the model had a darker color. So I selected those faces and applied the same blue material but lowered the value from the base color. Here I noticed that the light from the sun lamp was leaking into the cube-shaped building, so I added a solidify modifier to the ground and tweaked the offset. I also increased the size of the trees and rotated one of them slightly so they are not exactly the same. Then I duplicated one of the trees by using Alt-D and positioned the duplicate by following the reference. After that, I repeated the same process with other props. I look for a model, place it on the scene, change the material, and so on. So I will skip this part. Then I started working on the second shot. I added a new camera with a focal length of 35mm and started tweaking the position. I also duplicated the car model to have a reference on how to frame the second shot. Here I noticed that if I wanted the warm sunlight to hit the side of the car, I would have to hide the building next to it temporarily. So that's what I did by adding keyframes to the viewport and render visibility. One keyframe before the camera change where everything is visible and another one after where I hid everything. Here you see me tweaking the lighting a lot, but it's not worth mentioning because I ended up changing that later. Then I filled the scene with more props, following the reference and doing the same workflow as before. So I'll skip this part. After that, I started working on the third camera shot. Again, I used a 35mm focal length, and here you see me nailing the position, adding props, bringing back the building I hit before, and pretty much the same process as before. Finally, here's where the big lighting realization came. I basically had to use a normal background node on the world light with a bluish tone and dial down the strength. Then I duplicated that background node, added a mix shader, plugged the nodes to it, added a light path node and connected the east camera ray to the factor. This setup allows me to add light to the scene while maintaining the black background. Once I did this, everything fell into place. The lighting ended up looking really similar to the original video and also simplified things a lot because I deleted most of the lights and just kept two sun lamps, a warm one and a cold one. I also tweaked the rotation of the warm one at the end, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with the result. After all that, I started working on the remaining shots and the process was similar to everything I told you before, so I will also skip this part. But yeah, now that the scene building was pretty much done, I did a test render to ensure everything was fine. For my test renders, I like to set the noise threshold to 0.1 and the max samples to 50. I also optimized some settings for the final render, always trying to reduce render times while keeping as much quality as possible. First, I tweaked the light bounces, then decreased the indirect light value and increased the direct one, unchecked reflective and refractive, and checked persistent data under performance. Some of these settings decrease the realism of the final result, but it's not that noticeable. After seeing that the test render was fine, I started working on the characters. First, I downloaded a mannequin from Mixamo and used MetaTailor to dress it with free clothes you can find in the description. I made a lot of tutorials about MetaTailor on my channel and in my course, so I won't go in full detail on how to use it. Plus, I'm working on a video where I show you a free alternative to make these types of characters, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, I made 2 of these with slight variations and then imported them into Blender. Usually when adding a meta-tailored character to the scene, the materials look pretty bad, so I went and manually improved them by just using the original materials from each clothing asset. I also applied the light blue shader to the skin of the mannequins but kept the normal map from the original texture to maintain those details. Then I tweaked the colors of the clothing so they are mostly black, and finally I deleted the mannequin's body below the cloth to prevent clipping. Once the characters were done, I separated them into collections and hid them temporarily because I wanted to start working on rigging and animating the car. To do that, I basically followed this tutorial on YouTube. It was easier than I thought, but I encountered a problem. The add-on I needed to use to rig the car wasn't working for Blender 4.0 and above, so I had to install Blender 3.6, copy my car to another scene inside that version and use the add-on there. This time it worked perfectly. So I just had to copy my rigged car from Blender 3.6 to 4.5 and start working on animation. I kept following the tutorial and I animated the car along a curved path using a follow path constraint. The add-on also has an option to stick the wheels to the ground, and that made everything super easy to animate. Once I was happy with the path the car was following, I started animating the drift. This was also easier than I thought. The trick here is to nail the timing and imagine how a real car will move. Then it's just a matter of replaying the animation a lot of times, moving keyframes around until you have the perfect movement. Once I was happy with the drift, I wanted to bake the car's steering and wheel rotation, which is a functionality of the add-on. Unfortunately, it wasn't working, so I went to Blender 3.6 to bake the animation there, and it wasn't working either. After some research, turns out another guy had updated the add-on so it works on Blender 4.0 and above. And if I only knew that before, I wouldn't have to install Blender 3.6, but yeah, at least I learned something. So after installing the updated add-on, the baking function was working correctly, and now my wheels looked a lot more realistic with zero effort from my side. But now, to make the movement even more realistic, I started animating the suspension from the car. This brought everything together, making it look super nice. The trick here is to animate the bouncing back action from the car and not just the main movement. And now comes my favorite part, which is animating the camera. I love this because I get to apply all the techniques I learned from After Effects and even real life, but this is 100 times easier. But yeah, to make it short, in most of the animations, I used an empty to control where the camera was looking with a track 2 constraint and another empty to control the depth of field. Then it was a matter of parenting the right things to get the movement I wanted. For example, on the second shot, I parented the camera to the body of the car and also animated the camera itself with linear keyframes. I won't go into every camera movement, so if you want to know everything I know about animating cameras on Blender, I have a full video about that on my course. The link is in the description and you can join for free with a 7-day trial. After finishing all camera moves, I added some camera shake with the Shakeify add-on. It already comes with Blender, you just have to go to Edit, Preferences, Get Extensions and search for Camera Shakeify. After that, I used the out of car preset and lowered the influence to 0.1 for most shots and 0.15 for those shots with more movement. Then I wanted to animate the traffic. First, I tried using a driver to control the movement of the empty that was attached to the car, but that resets the location of it, and I didn't want that. So I added a new empty with a clear location, applied the driver and parent the car's empty to it. This way I could control the initial position of the car with one empty and the constant movement of it with another one. Then I repeated this process with the rest of the cars on the street. After that, I worked on the car that made the transition between the third and the fourth shot. I just needed to duplicate one of the cars and change its position, which was pretty fake, but the effect looked good on the final result. Finally, I added some keyframes to the location of the truck, just like the reference. And now I was at the beginning of the end because I just needed to add the characters and animate them. Compared to the camera work, this is by far the part I hate the most when making animations, but all that effort was super worth it at the end. First, I picked one of the characters and posted it in its initial position. A trick here would be to change the transform orientation from global to local, especially while posing fingers. Then I imported a gun that you can find in the description. The problem with this model is that it's super big, so I asked ChatGPT for the real size of an M16 gun, added a plane with those measurements, scaled the gun to fit it, and applied the scale. After that, I positioned the gun on the hand of the character and parented it to the hand bone with a child-of constraint. This way, every time I moved the hand of my character, the gun would move too. Then I parented the hip bone of the character to the car's body using a child-of constraint. This wasn't really needed because I could have just parented the whole skeleton with the car's body, but it worked anyways. When all that was done, my character and his gun now were attached to the car. So before adding more details, I went and did the same with the second character, but in a driving position. Here I noticed that my character was too big for the car, so I decided to artificially make it smaller for this shot. But before doing that, I duplicated it because I needed a version of it with its original scale for a future shot. I separated the duplicate into a new collection and hid it temporarily. Once all that was done, I proceeded to add details to my first character's movement. First, I started with some basic poses, like him extending his arm with a gun, but then I added tiny things like him reacting to the car's movement, and that really brought everything to life. Again, the trick here is to replay the animation a lot of times and move the keyframes until the timing feels right. When I was done with that, I duplicated the first character, reset its position, and separated it into a new collection. After that, I added keyframes to the viewport and render visibility for both characters, basically making them disappear for the fourth shot, where I'll be adding their duplicates with another pose. For the second pose of the first character, I just downloaded an idle animation from Mixamo and retargeted it using the Rococo add-on. Then I posed the gun the same way I did before, but noticed that the left hand wasn't synchronized with the gun. So I went to the non-linear animation editor and improved the pose. What the NLA editor does is combining the original animation with the adjustments I did, and this way the first character was already posed and animated without problem. Then I brought the second character to the scene, positioned it where I wanted, and imported his gun, which was also out of scale. So I repeated the same process as before to make it the right size. Animating him wasn't as easy as the first character, since his animation was more complicated. So first I tried animating and posing it with the normal Mixamo rig, but that was too difficult. So I converted the Mixamo rig to a Rigify rig with inverse kinematic controllers using the XPKit add-on, which was a lot easier to pose and animate. So yeah, first I started with the main poses, then I adjusted timing between keyframes, corrected some poses, and parented the gun to his hand the same way I did before. And yeah, I was pretty happy with the final result. Here I touch a lot of complex techniques on animating. They are not really complex, but they involve a lot of steps that I would have to outline in different videos. Thankfully, I already did that and did an entire section of animation techniques in my course. So if you want to check it out, the link is in the description and you can start for free with a 7-day trial. To finish the animation, I also keyframed their visibility so they appear right after the camera cut. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I activated motion blur on render settings. But yeah, after that, I checked all my render settings and started doing some test renders for each shot. This is super important to do before rendering the entire animation because you can spot some mistakes easily. For example, on the second shot, I noticed that the clothes of my character were super dark, and that was because I forgot to lower the metallic value to 0. Then I also noticed that on the third shot, the wheels of the car weren't touching the ground. So I went and decreased the max local seat value of the ground sensors from the add-on. When all of that was done, I proceeded to render my animation using the OctaRender farm. I talked a lot of bad things about this farm on a recent video, but since then, they actually improved some of the errors and now it's working pretty good. So lately, I've been mostly using Octarender because it's super fast and super cheap. I won't go into detail on how to use Octarender because I showed you how on a recent video I made and on my course. But something pretty useful that I learned recently about this farm is that if you encounter this issue where some of the frames have errors, don't re-queue them because that will waste a lot of credits. The best thing to do is to stop all sessions and divide the number of frames left by your batch size, and that's the amount of nodes you need to rent next. So do that and wait a little bit more for the rest of the frames. This sounds silly, but was a game changer for me because it allowed me to save a lot of credits and make a better use of this farm. So after rendering and converting the frames to a video, this is the final result. If you like this video, you will probably like this one. Consider subscribing and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.